I feel like we were very lucky to connect with her at the timing that we did, because right after we had agreed on this collaboration, Marie was approached by the US State Department to create a commissioned blanket column that was 2 stories high, that was going to be featured in the entrance atrium for the new United States Embassy in Pakistan. So a huge honor, international recognition. For her to be tapped as an artist to represent her country, that's a huge honor. And it also reinforces in my mind the fact that the series that she's doing is universal. Textiles, blankets, quilts, every culture has some sort of fabric and woven tradition. They're very intimate, the way that we live our lives. You know, we are welcomed into this world in a blanket. We wrap ourselves in clothing. It touches our skin. It's very personal and intimate. We use the clothes that we pick to wear to express identity and to communicate meaning to those around us. And then when we die, we are shrouded in textiles. It's how we exit the world as well. And I love that analogy. Marie speaks of that a lot when she is talking about her own work. And this focus on repurposing objects, because a lot of us, a lot of our families have quilts that were made by female ancestors, bed coverings, afghans, things that were knitted and crocheted, and we don't always have them out. We don't always have a way to use them unless we have a home with 20 or 30 different bedrooms. So this is a nice way, this concept that Marie has, where she comes into a community and she does a blanket drive. And what she wants to do is to invite people to donate these family quilts and these heirlooms to her, but she wants the story behind them. She wants to know why this was important, who made it, what stories is it a marker for, how does it spark your memory of the person that made it, and maybe how it was used in your family. And it was remarkable to see some of the stories that came in from our region. And this truly is the work that represents Corning and the Finger Lakes and Elmira and Bath and all the region at large. We got such a positive response. And as you can see in the image, I think it's easier to see it over Marie's shoulder. There is this kind of very archival, very industrial looking tag that is attached to each of the objects. And on that tag, in the handwriting of the person that donated it, is who they are, where they lived, and what their family story is. And as we were sifting through all of these stories, there were some that really stood out that were very impactful representations of human struggle and human triumph. And those became part of where Marie pulled her title from. As we look on this slide, we can see the title of the work at the bottom: Blanket Stories, Western Door, Salt Sacks, and Three Sisters. Western Door, I think if you talk to any fourth grader, such as our Butler Grant in New York State, they go through a unit where they study Iroquois or Haudenosaunee culture. And each of the 6 nations within that confederacy has a moniker, how they're known within the confederacy. And most of it is based on, some of it is based on geography and location. For the Seneca Nation that inhabits the land in our region in Western New York State, they were known as Keepers of the Western Door. So in a nod to our geographic location, as well as her personal ancestry, Marie pulled this out of some of the stories that we were receiving, and it became the first of 3 titles, Western Door. So that really grounds us into place and location and geography and culture. The next title, the next portion of the title, Salt Sacks, to me is a remarkable story, and it's really the one that I tend to gravitate towards when I'm doing a tour or I'm talking about this piece. There's a quilt that's about 4 feet up, and it is a white field, and it has red and blue trim on it, and it is threadbare, and it is worn, and it's got a tag on it in this beautiful handwriting from a woman who grew up a little bit north of here around Lake Seneca. And during the Depression, the families around here would repurpose the bags that the salt came in. And as you all know, on Lake Seneca, we've got 2 of the major salt producing companies mining salt in this area. So her family had taken these fabric salt bags, and after they were empty, they made a quilt out of them. And having grown up in the South, this is something that's completely familiar to me as well, that I remember hearing my grandparents talk about, wearing calico play clothes that had been made from cornmeal bags or flour bags. And so this is something that just strikes me as being so American and so resourceful at times of need, and a little bit specific to a certain generation as well. But I loved that tag, and she talked about this quilt and how it played a role in her family, and that even though they had, weathered the Depression, they had gone back and had a comfortable life, and they had, other nicer quilts and other nicer blankets. They never got rid of this. And it's a lovely story. It's beautiful to me that this sculpture is a combination of all of these stories from our region, and that they are being preserved at the Rockwell Museum. They're on view in the Contemporary Gallery, and I would venture to guess that will always be on view. This piece is really a work of our supporters. The last portion of the title, Three Sisters, is something that it's a theme that we see surface throughout a variety of different Native American nations and cultures. And literally it stands for corn, beans, and squash, these 3 primary crops that would be grown and staples of Native American diet. And we see that in our region. There's also a strong presence of that in the American Southwest. What metaphorically it references, and I love that Marie pulled this out because it's very complex. It is a metaphor for community. It speaks towards the fact that we live a better life, and we live a more comfortable and productive life when we live collaboratively and when we live in healthy community with one another. And what the natural world demonstrates for us in this metaphor is that the corn stalk grows up above the other 2, and it provides a central support pole for the beans to grow and twine upon. The squash stays low and has broad, flat leaves that cover and protect the base of all the plants and shelter them from the sun and help keep the soil moist. So they are all working together, bringing their unique qualities that might not be the skill set of their neighbor, and they're able to blend them and use them together so that they all thrive and they're more productive. And again, it's a brilliant use of language that can be read on many different levels that Marie pulled out. And the only addition that she made to the sculpture is in reference to Three Sisters. And as you look at the image that we have on the screen, you'll notice that there are 3 different horizontal bands of, it looks like silver little jingles. And there's one right above the base. There's one about in midsection that's kind of faceted around the corner, and there's one closer to the top. And these are powwow jingles. These are the noisemakers that would have been sewn on regalia for dances and for ceremonial events. and she has them repeated 3 times in homage to 3 sisters. The other unique feature to the blanket column that Marie crafted for the Rockwell Museum and our supporters that does not appear in any other work and any other commission that she has done is the base. And if you notice the base, it is of bluestone or linorock from our area, and that actually came from a quarry that is a little bit north of Ithaca. And you might ask how I know this. Well, I went as Marie's assistant on 2 different visits with our preparator, and we scouted rock at this quarry in rain and sleet and snow and hail, and we found just the right pieces that would provide the base and that fit her vision. And it is, again, it is a wonderful marker of geography, of the actual living rock that we are on right now, that supports us, and that this is the base of our sculpture, whereas every other work she has done in the series is a very elegant but a simple wooden plinth base, and it's not nearly as unique and as appropriate to its home as ours is, and I just love that. What else? I'm wondering if we want to ask some questions to be posed about the work. What are you all curious about? There are approximately 70 different textiles that were incorporated into the sculpture. And Maria's process in assembling and putting this together is very interesting because textiles in a museum environment can be a little bit tricky. So all of these were frozen. That is a conservation method that is used frequently to try to eliminate and eradicate any kind of contaminants that might come in on the fabric, mainly moth eggs. That's about the worst thing that any curator would want to find in her gallery is evidence of moths, because it is highly detrimental, especially for an Indigenous or a Native American collection or any collection that has textiles in it. So Marie processed these, she froze them, they were photographed. So linked to our website, and this is a really wonderful feature for this particular work, we have a microsite that has a photograph of every individual textile that was gifted, along with a photograph of the story tag that comes with it. And instead of, Kate, that's correct, they're the photograph of the handwriting, correct? They are, okay. I know in some places we had them translated where the handwriting was a little bit hard to read, but I love being able to see the expression of the individual in their handwriting as they filled the tag out. I think that adds a lot of meaning and a lot of individuality to those stories, and on top of the actual narrative that they're sharing with us. The assembly of her sculptures is proprietary, and we get asked that a lot. How does that stay up? And I am not able to comment on that. That's a trade secret. But that sculpture is about 9.5, 10 feet tall. I think it's closer to 10 feet tall, and it really does anchor our contemporary gallery that is up on the 3rd floor in the museum. We had a tablet in the contemporary gallery that was loaded to that site. So as you were in that space, you could sit down, and it was an invitation for you to look through and to spend more time with the object to help understand it.
And that tablet was a great creative solution to the urge to reach out and just read, grab and read the tags that appeal to you, because it's such an all of Marie Watt's work is like this. It really invites human touch because the objects are so human. But of course you can't touch any of it, and please don't, and please
don't
visit the
touch.
microsite instead. I have a couple of questions in the Q&A.
Oh, great.
What our favorite blankets are. Do you have a favorite blanket in the stack? I think it sounds like your salt sack.
I would say that the salt sack is really my favorite one. I have two other ones. One is mine, but and I'm sure many people found themselves in this situation. I really wanted to participate in the sculpture, but I didn't want to give up my quilt because it was one that was made by a family member, and I remembered using it as a child, and I wasn't quite ready to part with it. So Marie had kind of a caveat that was so spot on, where you could submit just a story, and she would find a surrogate textile to take that place. And the quilt, the story that I wrote about the family quilt mentioned what it looked like. It was a pink and white quilt, and she found a pink and white quilt at a thrift store, and that became my surrogate. And so my eye goes towards it. But I love that attention to detail and that minutia and that drive for excellence that she puts into her work is staggering. The other quilt, and this is something that kind of developed over time after we had installed the work. One of our local supporters, and I don't want to name names, I don't want to embarrass anyone, but somebody that is a great supporter of a variety of different art institutions in this region, and has deep roots here. She had given a baby quilt from one of her children, and it's this the story that goes with it is a beautiful story from a mother's perspective of a child that is transitioning. And we received this. It's a prominent tag that you see when you walk in the gallery. And we knew that her child was an artist. But a lot of people have artistic tendencies. Not everybody decides that they're going to do this for a living and is successful doing it full time. So I hear about a lot of different children that are artists, and I can't always remember them and their names very well. But fast forward a year or two, I was talking with this woman at one of our events, and she mentioned that her daughter is in Venice right now, that she was invited to exhibit at the Venice Biennale, and that is a huge, huge deal in the contemporary art world. And I was like, wait a minute, wait, what? And I was like, oh my gosh. So to tie up the loose strings, because I know I can't see your faces, but I'm sure I'm getting some puzzled looks. We had just acquired a work by her daughter, unknowing that it was her daughter. And that work is installed, pure coincidence, on the wall of the Contemporary Gallery, facing the tag, the story tag for the woman's quilt of the child's baby blanket. And the child's work now as a professional artist is facing it on the gallery wall. It was one of those moments that when my executive director, Brian Wisenhunt, and I do tours and we talk about this piece and we tell that story, we always give ourselves chills. It's just one of those amazing coincidences that happens in life. And we couldn't have planned that. So that is definitely one of my favorite blankets that is represented in the column.
Another thing that I really love about the blanket column is that when I have been at the Rockwell for just a little less than 2 years, so not very long, and I wasn't really, I'm new to this community, but when I look at the tags, you know, every month that goes by, I recognize more and more names of the people who contributed to it, which is a really nice thing. So it's really a marker of our community, which is very special. So another question, which this is a great question. Was it assembled on site, or was it assembled, you know, post freezing the blankets and making sure that the textiles were safe for the museum environment? Was it assembled on site, or was it brought in already assembled?
So it was assembled on site, and that's a good logistical question. That was 2017. In 2017, this was actually our featured exhibition for the summer in the Spotlight Gallery on our mezzanine level. So Marie came to Corning, and she had her assistant with her, and our curatorial staff worked with her to install it and assemble it in that space. And we had a wonderful opening reception, and Marie got to interact with the High School Learning Center and the students that were there then to speak to them. And then she went home, and summer passed by, and we had to close the exhibition. So our curatorial staff de-installed this, disassembled it, relocated it to the third floor, reassembled it, and we know that we got all of the blankets back in the right order, and we believe that they are oriented facing the right direction. And the challenging part for us is that the stone base is all loose stone. So we went through several different processes of documenting where her stone placement had been in a 3D environment, and working very diligently to move them and get them all back in the right place in a load-bearing base. And that took a lot of art historical engineering. So, because, you know, our historians are such wonderful, you know, physicists and draftspeople, marking and yeah.
That was such a great question. I can't believe I've never thought about that before. And I've seen, you know, we've seen lots of other, in our travels, Kirsty and I, we've seen other blanket columns by Marie Watt. And because of our historic building and the way that our ceiling height is, this is quite a small one actually in the scheme of, you know, compared to the scale of her other blanket columns. So now I'm just picturing, you know, there's one at the Denver Art Museum that's like 2 stories tall. So if they ever have to move that around, oh my goodness, what an undertaking.
Well, and some of them curve.
Yeah.
So there's curvature that goes into them. So when I'm gonna go out on a limb. I'm gonna say this and make this promise now, that I put my stamp on the fact that we will never move this sculpture during my tenure.
I think that
will
is
always be on view.
A wise choice. Better things to do with our time than we like it just where it is.
Exactly. Wow. That's a very good question, though.
That's so great. Well, we are at 10:36, so I know we're needing to wrap up. I'm just going to ask one more question. We also had the question of where were the blankets frozen, but that's not our last question I'm going to ask. That would be at our offsite location where we work with our collections.
Actually, that was that processing was done in Seattle in Marie's studio, because she has a much more sophisticated setup in handling textiles, and then they were vacuum sealed and shipped to us.
That makes sense. Okay, well, the last question that I'm going to ask is the date range of blankets from the oldest to the newest. Do you know what the oldest blanket is?
Do you know what? I do not know that off the top of my head, but I believe that There are some dates that are included in the story tags that you could find on the microsite.
Mhm.
And what my kind of anecdotal response to that is that I don't know that the donors had an exact date for every single blanket. What I'm remembering from a lot of those tags is that it was more of a range. But I would say 1890s
That's
up
what
to
I was
contemporary,
remembering.
because there is
Yeah.
somewhere in there is a contemporary Paw Patrol kids blanket that was given by one of our local families. So it's 1890s to 2017.
It's really such a great representation of a specific community. It's really neat.
It really is.
Well, the only other thing that our viewers want to know is where they can get an apron like grant.
That was a special present from Santa Claus.
So you have to put it on your list if you want one.
You have to be good. And you can't try to stay up all night and wait for him. You have to go to bed. And then you'll see what you get in your stocking.
You heard it here, friends.
You heard it here.
That's how to get what you want from Santa. Well, on that note, thank you. You're right. This was a treat to do in the middle of a work day, to have a nice chat. So
yes. Thank you all for
joining
us, and thank you for the interest that you take in our mission at the Rockwell Museum and your continued support. You are why we do what we do, and we are extremely grateful to be able to stay in touch and to still bring knowledge of this amazing art in our collection and of our region to each of you. Thank you.
And I echo those sentiments. All right, well, get in touch with us if you have any other questions, and make sure to tune in to our happy hours with the director and our next tea with the curator.